Oh, did you know Murphy?
Yeah.
Was he a good guy?
Oh, yeah, he's a good guy.
He threw a man out a window, stole a real tank, showed up drunk to movie sets. And that's just the beginning. Lee Marvin wasn't just playing tough guys in movies, he was one. Behind his famous white hair and cold stare was a man haunted by war wounds that never healed. The shocking truth? This Oscar winner was so damaged, he once threatened to kill his co-star, punched another actor just to test him, and blew through millions while drinking himself to death. Hollywood helped hide his darkest secrets for decades. Today, we're exposing what really happened when the cameras stopped rolling. Lee Marvin was born in New York City in 1924. His family was well off. His father worked in advertising, and his mother edited fashion magazines. He took violin lessons as a child, but nothing about his early life hinted at the tough guy he would one day become. He wasn't drawn to the arts, and he didn't seem like someone headed for a career in film. Still, something in him pushed against the life that was expected of him. As he got older, Marvin's rebellious side began to take over. He was kicked out of several boarding schools. In one wild moment, he even threw a roommate out of a second-story window. That kind of behavior made it clear he wasn't made for a quiet, orderly life. He ended up in a Catholic school in Florida, but didn't last long there either. Eventually, he dropped out completely. But when World War II broke out, he made a choice that surprised everyone, especially his father. He joined the Marines. Marvin was only 18 when he signed up. He served as a scout sniper in the Pacific and fought in 21 amphibious assaults. The worst came during the Battle of Saipan. He was hit by machine gun fire while leading his unit up a mountain. The bullets tore into his lower back, leaving a massive hole and damaging his nerves. He yelled out in pain, only to be met with a sharp reply from a fellow Marine. "Shut up! We're all hit." Moments later, a nearby explosion threw him off his stretcher, landing him right on the fresh wound. Nearly everyone in his platoon was killed that day. Only one other man survived. And he was the one who saved Marvin's life. It took more than a year in the hospital for Marvin to walk again. After the war, Marvin drifted for a while, unsure what to do next. He ended up working as a plumber's assistant in Woodstock, New York. One day, while fixing a toilet at a small theater, he was asked to fill in for a sick actor. He'd never acted before, but he took the part. Something about the stage clicked for him. It reminded him of the military: tight teamwork, high tension, and a sense of purpose. He started acting regularly and never looked back. His first break in Hollywood came in 1951. He played a tiny role in You're in the Navy Now, but the director saw something in him and gave him more screen time. Even better, he introduced Marvin to a Hollywood agent. Still, success didn't come fast. Marvin took whatever small parts he could find. Most of them were uncredited. He lived in a cheap apartment and often struggled to pay the bills. But he kept at it. In 1952, Marvin landed a role in 8 Iron Men, a war film where he finally got to show what he could really do. The character was a tough sergeant, and Marvin brought something different to the part: real combat experience. It wasn't just acting, it was lived in, believable. That role opened more doors, especially for playing men who had seen too much and didn't talk about it. The next year, he got noticed again, this time in The Wild One, playing opposite Marlon Brando. Marvin's character, Chino, was the leader of a rival biker gang. He didn't have as much screen time, but he stole every scene he was in. He came off as more dangerous than Brando, and audiences remembered him. The film was so edgy it was banned in the UK for 15 years. Strangely enough, Marvin's gang was called the Beatles, a name that would later inspire a certain band from Liverpool. By now, Marvin was becoming the go-to guy for tough, dangerous characters. Westerns, war films, crime dramas, he did them all. In The Big Heat, he threw scalding coffee into a woman's face in one of the most shocking scenes of the decade. He played a cowardly officer in Attack and a ruthless villain in 7 Men from Now. Directors trusted him to deliver grit and realism. He never had to fake toughness. He just brought who he was. Lee Marvin had been circling around the edges of stardom for years, playing tough guys and villains in one film after another. But everything changed when he landed the lead role in a gritty TV crime show called M Squad. From 1957 to 1960, he played Detective Frank Ballinger, a no-nonsense cop with a deep voice and silver hair that made him stand out. The show was a hit, even when it aired opposite major names like Frank Sinatra. Marvin wasn't just acting, he was becoming a star. He showed up in every one of the 117 episodes and even did commercials for the show's sponsor, Pall Mall cigarettes. That kind of thing would never fly today, but back then, it made him a familiar face in homes all across America. Still, TV fame only took him so far. It wasn't until The Killers came along in 1964 that Marvin really showed what he could do. He played a cold, calculated hitman named Charlie Strom. It was supposed to be a TV movie, but the violence was too much for network standards, so they released it in theaters instead. That move turned out to be lucky. The film became a critical hit, and Marvin's chilling performance was the center of it all. He didn't need to shout or overact. His presence was enough. The fact that Ronald Reagan was in it too, in his final film role before politics, only added to the buzz. Marvin's work in The Killers earned him a BAFTA and proved he had the depth to carry major films. Then came Cat Ballou in 1965, and that changed everything again. Nobody expected a rough, serious actor like Marvin to shine in a comedy, let alone win an Oscar for it. But that's exactly what happened. He played 2 roles, a goofy, drunk gunfighter named Kid Shalene, and a creepy villain with no nose. People couldn't stop laughing at the scene where Marvin and his horse both leaned against a wall in a drunken daze. It became legendary. When he won the Academy Award for Best Actor, he joked that half the credit belonged to the horse. Suddenly, Marvin wasn't just a tough guy. He was a box office draw who could make people laugh. Just a few years later, Marvin took another unexpected turn. In Paint Your Wagon, a Western musical, he insisted on singing his own songs, even though he wasn't exactly known for his voice. His rough, gravelly version of Wand'rin' Star sounded nothing like a polished Broadway tune. But maybe that's why people loved it. The song shot to #1 in the UK, even beating the Beatles' Let It Be. People joked that his voice sounded like rain in a rusty pipe, but it didn't matter. The song worked. Marvin, of all people, became a one-hit wonder. By then, his name alone could sell a movie. That became crystal clear when he starred in Point Blank in 1967. He was paid a whopping $1 million for the role, an unheard-of amount at the time. The movie itself was stylish and strange, with flashbacks and sharp bursts of violence. Marvin played a man out for revenge, and he owned every scene. He didn't just act in it, he helped shape it. He picked the director, helped guide the story, and made sure it had a unique edge. The gamble paid off. The movie made a profit, earned strong reviews, and years later, it was even chosen by the Library of Congress for preservation. That payday proved Marvin wasn't just another actor. He was a star with power, and he knew exactly how to use it. Lee Marvin wasn't just a tough guy on screen. He was that way in real life, too. When he played Major Reisman in The Dirty Dozen, it became one of his best-known roles. But filming the movie was a mess behind the scenes. Marvin drank heavily, often disappearing for hours during shooting. Crew members had to search local pubs to drag him back. One time, he was supposed to drive a truck with Charles Bronson beside him, but Marvin was gone. When they finally found him, drunk and out of it, they fed him black coffee and brought him back to set. Bronson was furious. He yelled at Marvin, threatening him, and the tension was obvious to everyone. Marvin later said he drank to forget what he'd seen in World War II, but that didn't make things easier on set. Still, the film was a huge success. It made over $45 million on a small budget. Marvin, though, didn't care for it. He thought it was just a flashy action movie, not a real war story. The year after, he worked on Hell in the Pacific. It was just him and Japanese actor Toshiro Mifune, stuck on an island, playing soldiers who couldn't speak each other's language. Both had actually fought in World War II. Marvin as a Marine, Mifune in the Japanese army. That added a strange, quiet tension to the movie. Marvin wanted everything to feel real, so he even asked to use live ammunition in some scenes. He thought it would make the fear more believable. The shoot was rough. The island was hot, the days were long, and Marvin wasn't easy to work with. To make things more confusing, the film had two endings. In one, the characters walk away. In the British version, they both die in an explosion. The director hated that change. He said it ruined the message. Despite all the effort, the movie didn't make money. It lost millions. Years later, Marvin joined The Big Red One, a war film based on the director's own life. He had wanted to be in it for decades. By the time it finally happened, Marvin was in his mid-50s, tired, and still drinking. But he insisted on doing all his own stunts. The filming took place in Israel and Ireland because the budget was too small for more locations. Marvin took the role seriously. He wanted every scene to feel like real war, and he pushed the younger actors hard. He clashed with them if he thought they were being fake. The director's first version of the movie was nearly 4 hours long, but the studio cut it down to less than 2. Marvin hated that. He said they destroyed the truth of what the film was trying to say. The heat during filming was brutal, but Marvin refused any special treatment. He wanted to be treated like everyone else. In one of his last major roles, Marvin played a shady American businessman in Gorky Park. By then, he was almost 60. His body was wearing down from years of injuries and drinking. The movie was shot in Finland, pretending to be Russia, because the Soviets didn't want the film made. It was bitter cold, sometimes below -20 degrees. Marvin had bad arthritis and breathing problems. He needed oxygen between takes, but he still did his own fight scenes. One of them was so rough, he cracked 2 ribs and had to go to the hospital. The director had to film Marvin early in the day, while he was still clear-headed and could move. The movie barely made its money back, but critics loved Marvin's performance. At first, he was meant to play the lead, but his health forced him to take the smaller role instead. Marvin's bad behavior on set was well known by then. While filming The Professionals, his drinking got so bad that co-star Burt Lancaster nearly threw him off a cliff. He warned Marvin that if he showed up drunk again, he'd toss him off the mountain. That threat worked. Marvin sobered up, at least for the rest of that movie. On another set, point blank, Marvin punched a fellow actor in the stomach just to see if he could handle the role. The wildest story happened during The Dirty Dozen. Marvin got drunk, stole a real tank, and drove it through the set, wrecking everything. They had to shut down filming for 2 days, but directors kept hiring him. They said his danger made him special. You never knew what he might do, and that gave his characters an edge no one else had. Few people know that Marvin could sing. In Paint Your Wagon, he performed a song called Wand'rin' Star, and it became a hit. It even outsold the Beatles in the UK. His voice was low and rough, but it worked. He also played the harmonica, something he picked up while serving in the Marines. Years later, he even recorded music with Dave Mustaine from Megadeth, though those vocals were later replaced. Marvin loved music. He even made musical suggestions during film shoots, though he never asked for credit. What many don't realize is that Marvin also worked behind the scenes. On The Dirty Dozen, he rewrote huge parts of the script without credit. He added real military language and helped make the action more believable. One time, he showed up to set hungover after a pub crawl and rewrote an entire scene with Charles Bronson between takes. He did that kind of thing often, even keeping a notebook full of dialogue changes. His suggestions saved the studio thousands in consultant fees. Marvin also had a big impact on younger actors. While filming The Big Red One, he became a mentor to Mark Hamill, who had just finished Star Wars. Marvin taught him how to act like a real soldier, how to show trauma, how to handle weapons, and how to move like someone who had seen war. He spent hours with Hamill, giving him advice. Later, Hamill said Marvin's help changed how he approached acting. Even after filming ended, Marvin wrote him a long letter with career tips. Hamill kept it for years. He even tried directing. In 1969, bothered by what was happening in Vietnam, Marvin made a documentary using his own money. He flew to Vietnam, interviewed soldiers, and filmed combat scenes himself. The result was raw and intense. A major studio planned to release it, but the government didn't like what it showed. They said it might hurt morale. So the film was shelved, only shown a few times in private. After Marvin died, the film disappeared. Some believe it's one of the most important war documentaries never released. Marvin also helped produce a movie in secret. The Killers was meant to be a TV film, but Marvin helped turn it into a theatrical release. He put up his own money and pushed to cast Ronald Reagan as a villain, which surprised everyone. He also insisted they use a specific car, the Shelby Cobra, which became a key part of the film's style. That movie was his favorite, not because of his acting, but because it was the first time he shaped a project from start to finish. A year later, he won an Oscar for Cat Ballou. Lee Marvin was a tough guy on screen, but off camera, he was fighting a battle he never really won. His problems with alcohol started after World War II, where he served as a scout and sniper. He fought in some of the most brutal battles in the South Pacific and was badly wounded in Saipan. Pieces of shrapnel stayed in his body for life, but what hurt more were the wounds no one could see. Many believed he had what we now call PTSD. Drinking became a way to cope. It didn't take long for that habit to take over his life. In Hollywood, Marvin's drinking was well known. Some directors even said alcohol made his acting better. Others banned it on set because he became too unpredictable. He tried to quit many times, especially during his marriage to Betty. He would drink heavily, feel guilty, promise to stop, but always fall back into the same pattern. Later, when he lived with Michelle Triola, he gave up trying to stop. That's when some of his wildest drinking episodes happened. Things got especially bad during the filming of The Dirty Dozen in 1966. Marvin's drinking almost shut the whole movie down. He would disappear for hours, usually off drinking in a nearby pub. The crew often had to go find him and bring him back. One time, he was supposed to drive a military truck in a scene with Charles Bronson, but Marvin was nowhere to be found. They finally dragged him out of a bar, poured coffee into him, and rushed him back to the set. He stumbled out of the car in front of everyone. Bronson had had enough and threatened him. It might not have been serious, but it showed how frustrated the rest of the cast had become. Marvin made a few efforts to get clean in the late 70s and early 80s. In 1976, his wife Pamela and his friends convinced him to check into rehab. He left after 3 days, saying it was for people with real problems. A few years later, his doctor warned him about his liver and heart. Marvin tried another rehab clinic in Arizona. That lasted 2 weeks. He couldn't stick with it. Directors began to avoid him. Insurance companies didn't want to cover him. On one movie set, his hands shook so badly that crew members had to help him hold props. Friends said he became angry and isolated. By the early 80s, he was in and out of the hospital with alcohol-related health issues, but he kept drinking. Around the same time, another storm was brewing, his legal fight with Michelle Triola. The two had lived together for 6 years. When they split, she sued him for $1.8 million, half of what he earned during their time together. They'd never married, but she said they shared everything like a husband and wife. Her lawyer called it palimony, a new kind of alimony for unmarried couples. At first, the courts didn't take her seriously. California had gotten rid of common law marriage back in 1895, but in 1976, the state Supreme Court ruled that she could sue. That changed everything. Suddenly, there were over 1,000 similar cases waiting to be heard, and more in other states. Michelle even changed her last name to Marvin and claimed they shared bank accounts. She said Lee told her, "What I have is yours." When the trial began in 1979, it became a media circus. Every day, the courtroom was packed. Michelle claimed she got pregnant 3 times while they were together. 2 abortions, she said, were at Lee's request, and 1 pregnancy ended in miscarriage. The second abortion, she claimed, left her unable to have children. She said he'd proposed marriage twice and even showed love letters as proof of their bond. But Marvin told a very different story. He said he never loved her, never promised her anything, and joked that she should have taken a more famous last name, like Cooper for Gary Cooper. After 11 weeks, the judge ruled that Michelle had no legal claim to his money, but he gave her $104,000 for rehabilitation, saying it would help her get back on her feet. It was based on her old salary as a singer. Michelle saw it as a win. So did Marvin. She told reporters, "If a man wants to leave his toothbrush at my house, he better bloody well marry me." Lee later called the trial a joke and admitted, "Everyone was lying, even I lied." That raised eyebrows, but he was never charged with perjury. In 1981, the court took away the $104,000 too, leaving Michelle with nothing. Even though she lost, the case changed American law. It proved that unmarried partners could sue for support or shared property. Palimony became a real legal term. It inspired jokes on TV, but it also paved the way for serious changes in how courts treated long-term relationships. Today, California still allows these kinds of claims, and the Marvin case is still used as a legal reference. Michelle moved on. She spent the next 30 years with Dick Van Dyke until she died in 2009. Lee Marvin's career never fully recovered. The trial and his drinking problems followed him to the end. Lee Marvin's last film was The Delta Force, released in 1986. He starred alongside Chuck Norris, but it was clear to everyone that something was wrong. Marvin, once known for playing tough, rugged characters, looked tired and frail. He was only 63, but his body was giving out. The role demanded action, energy, things he no longer had. Behind the scenes, he was in pain. His stomach hurt constantly, and doctors diagnosed an inflamed colon. It was a quiet sign of something more serious, something that would follow him to the end. The film came out in February, and although it added one last credit to his long and respected career, it also showed just how far he'd fallen from his prime. By December of that year, Marvin was in the hospital again. At first, no one knew what was wrong. He'd been in terrible pain at his ranch in Arizona and needed intestinal surgery. Doctors still thought it was just inflammation, no cancer in sight. But then the truth came out. He had valley fever, a rare fungal infection that strikes hardest in the American Southwest. For most people, it's not deadly. But Marvin had been smoking for decades. His lungs were weak. His immune system couldn't fight back. To help him breathe, doctors gave him steroids. But that led to a rupture in his intestines. He had to have part of his colon removed. The treatment meant to save him had left him even more broken. As months passed, he didn't recover. On August 13, 1987, he was admitted again, this time for good. What started as the flu was really just the final blow to a body that had already endured too much. In those final days at Tucson Medical Center, there was one moment of peace. His 4 children from his first marriage came to visit. It had been years since they were close, and they had grown apart. The reunion was quiet, emotional, and too late to change much. Later, people would learn that Marvin had left them just $10,000 to share in his will. It stunned many, given how much he had once meant to them, and how little he gave back. His second wife, Pamela, stayed with him throughout it all, holding on to what little time was left. On August 29th, Marvin died of a heart attack. He was 63. When news broke, there was a wave of sadness, followed by a strange debate. Some people questioned if he deserved to be buried in Arlington National Cemetery. After all, he was an actor. But others remembered who he had been before Hollywood. Private First Class Lee Marvin, U.S. Marine. He had fought in World War II, been wounded, and earned a Purple Heart. He'd survived 21 landings and spent over a year in recovery. That part of his life was real, and it earned him a quiet corner in Arlington. On October 7th, he was buried with full military honors. His grave sits near the tomb of the unknown soldier, close to boxing legend Joe Louis. His headstone is simple and to the point, just like he was. Though The Delta Force was the last film Marvin made, Golden Girl was released after his death. It had been shot years earlier, but it finally saw the light of day in 1979. Unfortunately, it didn't land well. The story, about a genetically engineered athlete, felt strange and distant from the kinds of films Marvin had once made famous. Audiences didn't connect with it, and critics saw a man who looked like he didn't want to be there. It barely made back a fraction of its budget. Over time, though, the film found a tiny cult following. Some now look back at its strange themes, science, genetics, commercialization, and find it oddly ahead of its time. Years later, Betty Marvin, Lee's first wife, published a memoir. It gave people a different view of the man they thought they knew. She wrote about the struggles, the drinking, the anger, the lingering trauma from war. There was even a story of Marvin firing a gun inside their house during a drunken episode. These weren't just Hollywood tales. They were signs of a man battling demons. One surprising detail stood out. Marlon Brando, of all people, once babysat their first child. The book showed Betty's strength, her rise from tough times to becoming an artist, and her take on living in Marvin's shadow. It added depth to the story of a man who had been larger than life on screen, but deeply complicated off it.